Welcome back, disciples, to the Red Letter Disciple podcast. My name is Zach Zender, host of this, and I'm going to bring my co-host, Chris Johnson, back in just a couple of minutes for our great conversation today. The mission of the Red Letter Disciple is to challenge you, wherever you are, to be a greater disciple of Jesus, believing that when we all are greater disciples, the world is going to see a beautiful, greater, fresher expression of Jesus and truly change. And I really believe that the conversation we're having today, it's going to help. It's going to challenge you. It's going to inspire you. You're going to laugh a lot. You may even cry in this one. We got the story of the year, I believe. We got two local pastors, Andy Kaup and Walter Hooker of Bellevue Christian Center, that are coming into the studio today. And we're going to hear a story of these two pastors, one black, one white. They became friends many, many years ago. They went through adversity, even at their own church together. And then amazingly, in the midst of that adversity, while one was experiencing a kidney failure, the other found out he was the perfect match. And it's this beautiful story that God weaves together. So we're going to talk racial reconciliation and healing along the way, the power of God and his story and how he amazingly, miraculously is still moving. And I think it's going to really challenge us today. Today's episode is brought to you by Red Letter Living. We create resources that challenge disciples of Jesus to be greater disciples. And so one of the resources we're really excited about, and you're going to hear a lot of this sort of talk today about reconciliation. Our newest is the 40-day Forgiving Challenge, really trying to help people experience God's freedom. We talk a lot about forgiveness today. We talk a lot about reconciliation. But what I've noticed, and when I've asked this in rooms, far more people today struggle to receive God's forgiveness for themselves than they even do to forgive others. And so what would it look like for you, for your church, to all experience God's freedom? And so Lent is coming up. It's only a few weeks away, and that is the number one season we've found for churches to do 40-day challenges. And so if you want in, get in. More than 100 churches are in already this Lenten season for a 40-day challenge, and Forgiving Challenge is a perfect one for you. Not only will you hopefully learn and grow in freedom as you receive God's forgiveness, but pastors, you're going to see 40% growth in your small groups when you implement a 40-day challenge. You're going to focus on the words of Jesus, and that's going to bring unity. And so all of that was 6 weeks of done-for-you materials. Hey, you can find out more about Forgiving Challenge at forgivingchallenge.com. If you'd like a free copy mailed to you, we would be happy to do that as well. You can find all the links at redletterpodcast.com, and we would love to partner with you. But hey, only a little while left until Lent is coming. So we would love to partner with you for an amazing 40-day experience to bring God's freedom. All right, we're about to get into the story of the year. But first, hey, if this episode is helpful, tell a friend. Tell a friend in real life. Go check out the Red Letter Disciple. Also, would you please follow or subscribe on whatever platform is your preference? And if you would, we would really appreciate a 5-star review. That really helps us continue this journey. So here we go. Episode 2 of season 3. Let's do this.
Do you like great stories, ladies and gentlemen?
Oh, you're starting.
I thought. Do you like great stories? This is season 3, podcast episode 2. My name is Pastor Chris. With me, as always, my faithful companion, Zach Zender. He owns the company. But here's the thing. Today, we have an amazing story. So whether you're a church leader, you are a Christian, whether you're on the fence with this whole thing, you need to listen to this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand it over to the host, Zach Zender.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm excited. We got a fun one today. We got 4 pastors in a really tight space that's going to talk about Jesus today. But we got pastors Andy Kaup and Walter Hooker, who are pastors at Bellevue Christian Center.
The Hook.
The Hook. That's his name.
The Hook.
Nickname. Bellevue's right outside of Omaha. So we got 3 Huskers, and then don't hold it against Chris. He's from Iowa.
I'm out.
What?
You confused.
Are you not a Husker?
You got me mixed up with somebody.
Wait, what are you?
Whoever's playing the Huskers.
Yeah, come on! Right there! Hook is my man!
All right, I didn't know that.
That's my man.
Cut? No, just kidding. No, but
Me too.
So these two pastors, Andy and Hook, they've got a powerful story that's linked them together more than just being on staff. And we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But I would love for you to give me a little bit of each of your background, both of you in Bellevue now. But yeah, have you always grown up here? And both of you are pastors. So how'd you get into that?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having us on, man. Yeah. This is going to be it's already been a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see how this goes. But for me, I grew up in Bellevue. My family moved to Bellevue when I was 5 years old. So it's always been home. Our church there, Bellevue Christian Center, been going there since I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
So that's always been home, grown up in the church. Went to school there. And as much as my family was involved in the church, there was a period, kind of the teenage years, we all kind of go through that season. But
Sure.
I did just about anything I could to run away from the church and just this life. I definitely did not see myself as being a pastor, let alone a pastor on staff at the church that I grew up in. And there were just individuals that stuck with me through all of the craziness, the ups and downs, the trials that I went through, Hook being one of those guys. So our story even goes way back to when I was a kid, but Bellevue's been home. Love the city, love being there, love being a part of the greater Omaha space. But this is kind of
how long have you two known each other?
Since he came to Bellevue.
So
That's 5 years.
Since you were 5.
Since I was 5.
And Hook, did you work at the church then?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been at Bellevue since '88.
Oh my goodness.
And I came on staff in '94.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you knew a young.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Young. Okay.
And did you ever think you'd be the day where you're next to him as pastor?
No. But as we grew up, it became obvious. I mean, like you said, there was a time in his life where you said, I don't know if Andy, but as he began to yield and surrender to the call that God had on his life, it was obvious.
I think that's really cool, though, because I think a lot of times, we try to position or even ask, teenagers, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we're going through these really rough times where we're still figuring out who we are.
Right.
And even if it's not sort of in the cards at that point, or nobody can see it at that point, it's amazing that, God has these stories that he writes through us. And so cool. So that's Andy. All right, Hook, tell me your story.
I'm originally from North Carolina.
Okay.
I joined the military in 79, and I ended up in Omaha in 89. And my wife, 3 kids. When I got here, we had been married 10 years. I had a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Now we've been married 42 years.
Come on.
I have a 43-year-old, a 39-year-old, a 38-year-old grandchildren, 15, 14, 12, 9, 6, 4, and 4.
There you go.
You ever jumble up the names?
All
Yeah.
the time,
Okay.
all the time.
I do that with my son sometimes. I've got 2. I can't even imagine what you're going through. Like one time the other day, my kid's name is Carter, and I said, Mushu, get over here. That's my dog. That's where I got in trouble. That's where the wife's like, you really need to learn these kids' names at some point.
Yeah, I watched my parents do that. And I said, how can they do that? How can they get us? And now I do it. So it just comes with being a grandparent.
Okay, good. I have hope.
But we came to Bellevue in '88, and I was in the military. And in '93, I was preparing the PCS, and we were getting ready to go to Belgium.
Oh, wow.
And, Pastor Gary, who's both our pastors who sat under, he asked me to come on staff. So we got out of the military in '94, in August of '94, and I came to work at the church in September of '94.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And what I love, so we have 2 pastors, obviously here. One, you guys don't look like each other, which is awesome. And
he has hair and I don't.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
The only difference.
That's what I'm saying. But that's what I think is so neat.
Andy's got earrings.
Yeah.
So that's the other.
I didn't wear mine today.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes we hear there's validity to it, that sometimes that hour on Sunday morning is one of the most segregated hours.
For sure.
And so here we have a black and a white pastor that are serving together. And I'm really trying to steward this platform and find my voice and use my voice in the cause to bring reconciliation. So you guys are in it on a day-to-day basis just because of your stories and who you are. So what have you found in working together when it comes to reconciliation and what we can do, all of us as everyday disciples, that can help bridge the gap there?
Yeah. I think, when I look back just over the last couple of years, and if I'm being honest, that's probably when the majority of these kinds of conversations began for me. That prior to 2020, there was some awareness of the divide racially that we have in our world, but I wouldn't say that I was really aware of where not only our world was at, but where is our city at? Where is our church at? And so we began just having some conversations that because of the nature of our relationship and friendship, we were able to just really talk and be honest and be able to just say things that we knew, okay, as I say this, I know this isn't right.
It's gonna come out wrong.
But don't hate me for this. Yeah.
But this is what's in my head and my heart, and I need a safe place to process it. Wow. And we were able to just begin those conversations with each other.
That's
and
super
then
cool.
With our staff and with our church as a whole. But I would say that's probably been one of the biggest lessons learned over the last couple of years, is how necessary these relationships and conversations are. You've got to be able to have a place where I can say all the wrong things, but he knows me and loves me enough to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I also know you. Let's talk about that. Let's process it together. So,
and you know, as we talk about saying the wrong things, feeling the wrong way, those thoughts, feelings, and attitudes came from somewhere, some experience you had, something you saw, something someone said to you. And all of us are in this journey of experiences. We are who we are because of our journey. So I don't judge him because of his journey, but let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about how you were raised in your home. Let's talk about the city that let's talk about how many Blacks you went to school with, you know, and all of that stuff. Let's just put it on tape and talk about it. And then we understand, man, that's why I feel the way I feel. But there's another way to feel, but I've never had an opportunity because I've never had that experience. And what we try to do is provide opportunities for people to share their journey, to share their experience, what they've seen, how they felt in certain situations, in a safe environment where you can say it and know that you're going to be understood and not judged.
So how do you do that? How do you allow people to share those experiences?
Shut up and listen.
That's good.
And I can tell for you and me, that's a hard thing.
We're talkers.
We're talkers.
Yeah.
Again, as pastors, we're talkers. Our job is to give information. But in this experience of trying to work through reconciliation and diversity, you gotta learn the skill of listening and appreciating the other person's point of view, not to judge it, but to understand it and appreciate it.
Yeah, and I feel like we had a mutual friend in Florida, Ben Hoyer, that really helped me kind of on this path of journeying or exploring probably about 7-8 years ago. And I feel like, Andy, I was and I'm trying to break out of like the same thing you said, that I had an understanding of it, but it was a shallow understanding. Like I knew there was a problem. Oh yeah, we're against that. Of course we are. But like there's a deeper level that I think a lot of people in my color of skin don't understand. And the times I've talked about it, again, mostly to a white audience, it has not come out well. And I've learned certain things to say and not say. But I do think that that's with a lot of like Christian minded people that have my color of skin. It's not that there's not an awareness, but I do think that there's a deeper level that a lot of us have not yet entered into. And that's what I would love to push people into. The thing that Ben encouraged us to get into 7-8 years ago, the thing that in 2020 encouraged a lot of people. And so what's a good, like, is it just finding one person that looks different, is different, and being able to say, hey, I need to know more about this. I'm not going to say it the right way, but can I be a safe? What would you say, Hook?
I've read statistics, and don't quote me on this, but 77% of white people don't have a Black friend.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a acquaintance. I'm talking about a friend where you can sit down and say those things and they'll hear you. And no matter what you say, they're going to love you. 77% of white people, like, you just don't have that opportunity. 65% of Black people don't have a white friend where they can listen to and help guide them and share why you feel the way you feel. So you're starting from a negative point of view. So we need to understand that if we don't press it, if we're not make it a point to meet people who are different than us, to hear perspectives from people who are different, to hear perspectives from people who are different from us.
What'd you say?
Not to change people, but to
Right.
hear them, then you don't grow. I've had the wonderful opportunity, which some people would call, man, that's rough. I was part of segregation and integration. In the 6th grade, they moved me from a black school to a white school. My life changed.
Wow.
There was about 10 of us. They moved from the black school and stuck us in with these whites. And these whites had never gone to school.
In North Carolina.
In North Carolina, in the South. And, you got all of that. But the thing that saved me for most of us, and I'll talk about, I was in sports. And if you're in sports, then it kind of levels the playing field. So I learned from white guys because of sports. And it's just so funny. From the 7th grade to the 12th grade, I mimicked white people. My whole education in high school was because of white people. If they took advanced biology, I took advanced. If they took chemistry, I took chemistry. If they took French, I took French. Talking to the quarterback, he and I were the best friends. So he would identify. So I took the same thing, and it changed me. And I learned, man. I said, man, being around white people, it's kind of fun. I tease black. I said every black person should have a white guy. I mean, a white girl. I mean, it just makes life better to have somebody who's different. Last thing, I went to college, and the college I went to, East Carolina University, 1979, 75. I went to college. There was 13,000 students, 500 blacks.
Wow.
I lived in a dorm that had balconies, and these guys had this little thing that sat on the balcony, and they said, we're going to grill today. And I said, where's the grill? They said, it's on the balcony. Didn't you see it? I said, what are you talking about? And they said, right there. I said, what is that? That's a grill. I said, that's no grill like we ever see. These little hibachi things. And I said, oh my God, what kind of world? And then they said, we're going to cook steaks. And they brought this thing out like this. I had never seen a steak until I went to college and had these white friends. And I can just go on and on about things. I learned from people like you, man. You guys are really interesting.
Well, and I would say the same thing about people like you. But seriously, it makes life more fun, and it's more rich when you understand other cultures and where they're coming from. And so, one more question on that I would have, if you just said like the main problem is 77% of whites don't have a black friend. I think it's 63, 65% of blacks don't have a white friend. How do we? And then I heard you say sports, so that's like something to do. And so, is it like just finding a hobby or a project, or like? Because I think the last thing we want is to come into this with sort of, from my perspective, a white man savior perspective, like, oh, I'm going to help. Because that's not. No. I want to learn, and I'm better when I learn and be a part of this. And so, I don't want to come from that perspective, and I don't want to come in an inauthentic way. And so, how do I make a friendship with someone who's different than me? Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, what's a step or two that might be good?
First, you got to be intentional. Yeah. You got to say, man, I have to put myself in situations that might be uncomfortable. I have to put myself in situations where I am maybe the only one. I have to find someone as you go through life and you meet someone. You say, man, I really would like to just sit down and talk to you. We live in a Christian world, and we find people who are different cultures, different experiences. And you say, man, I'm trying to grow in some areas, and I really, you just got to be vulnerable, put yourself out there. One of the things that we as blacks that gives us a heads up is we've always been the odd one. I can tell you classes where I was the only black in there. So we grew up naturally being in that. You got to get uncomfortable and put yourself in situations where you are one of the few versus the many.
So just to recap, I think what we've learned so far from Hook is that white people have gigantic steaks and horrible grills.
Yes. Is it George Foreman grill or what?
This is way before George Foreman.
I think I had a George Foreman grill in college. No, go ahead. Yeah.
I think one of the things too, like for me, I had to learn that my world is not the whole world.
Yeah. Same.
That if I approach things with that perspective, that like, man, there's so much more than just what I know up to date and what I've learned so far, then I become genuinely curious about other cultures, other ways of life, other perspectives. And it's that curiosity that drives friendships deeper, right? And I want to know more of your story. As I start to learn someone's story, I go, man, I can't even imagine what that was like growing up that way, or I know for us also, like one of the great equalizers is just sharing meals. It's food. It's,
Yeah.
it's sitting
We all gotta
down.
eat.
Exactly. It's sitting down to a meal together. And it's amazing what that can do, because sharing a table with somebody is opening up your life to them.
Yeah.
And so that's me inviting him to my table and him inviting me to his table. And that has gone so far in just what you can learn through that process and just getting outside of your own head, getting outside of your own world.
I knew Andy was on the track to recovery discovery when he ate some chitlins with me.
I love them. Absolutely.
It changed everything.
That is friendship. That's friendship. That is friendship.
I think that's so good. And like to remind ourselves that the world we're in, if we're not intentional, is not all there is. And for me, what opened my eyes, again, it was about 7-8 years ago. And it was joining a 3-day experience in Orlando where there's 15, 16 of us that looked different. Men, women, age, race, obviously was a huge part of it. And for me, it was the second day when I went to the Orange County Courthouse and the pre-arraignment hearing, and just seeing 22, 23 people, every single one of them black or brown, and everybody behind the bench white. And that wasn't staged.
No.
And that's something my eyes won't ever unsee. And it's like, until I had that moment and was able to then process that with the same group that came into the courthouse, which when I came in that morning, it was "Good morning, sir." And when the a black friend of mine that came in wearing a nice suit, it was "Good luck." And that's just different words. And he was the guard was being nice. And so having that experience, that intentionality, like you said, putting yourself in uncomfortable places and in situations to open our eyes is so good. And I'm always putting myself in uncomfortable situations because I stand next to Chris, so I feel pretty good about that. But
that's true.
All right, Hook. A couple of years ago, we're going to do a pivot here. You were diagnosed with a kidney failure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of listeners that obviously deal with crisis. The last couple of years has sort of, had its greater number of those. And so how'd you cope with that? And what was that experience like?
Well, in the military, I took a lot of anti-inflammatories, lifting weights, and your joints inflame, and you just start popping that stuff like candy to deal with the pain, and the doctors just give it to you. And what happened? It affected my kidneys. So in the military, I had some kidney failure, but we were on top of it. I had a nephrologist. I go to him every year. We check the numbers. We were good. Matter of fact, this happened in December of 20. In September 20, I went to see my nephrologist. My numbers were good. Got COVID in December the 15th. I went to Nebraska Med Center with COVID. Found out that my kidneys were failing or had failed. I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks, not because of COVID, but because of my kidneys. And they started me on dialysis, and
so everything was going pretty well until COVID happened.
All this was COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I missed Christmas with my kids. Never had done that. Missed my anniversary, which was the 29th of December. For my wife and I, it's the worst 2 weeks of our life. She, that was when she couldn't come to the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I would FaceTime, she said she didn't want to look at me because I was so drought and ashy because of my kidneys not working. So I got out of the hospital, still on dialysis. I was on dialysis through February. Then they said, let's take you off now because COVID's left your body and maybe your kidneys will bounce back. Well, it went 2 or 3 months. They did. Matter of fact, they got worse. So they told me in April, May that I was going to have to start dialysis again and that I probably could get on the kidney transplant list. So we started that process. I started dialysis at home in July. I also started my application to get on the kidney transplant list. I also started looking for donors.
Yeah.
Even before I got on the transplant list, I was looking for donors. And
what's that mean? How do you look for donors?
Well, they give you a link. I mean, just to be in this day and age is incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone says, man, I just want to see if we're matched, whatever. You give them the link. They click it, go to it, give some initial health information. They screen you to see if you are a viable candidate for any kidney transplant.
Okay.
If there's, if you're on some medication or you had some condition that would disqualify you, not just for me, but for anybody.
Right.
So that's the initial. If you pass that, then and you went through it. What happens then?
Yeah. So after that kind of initial screening, are you still qualified? You end up scheduling some time to go in, and they take all kinds of blood work, and that's when they start really diving into what's your blood type, what's your tissue type, what's they do ultrasounds and all kinds of stuff.
I mean, this is a huge process.
Yeah. So there's a lot of steps to it. And I mean, they want to monitor absolutely everything to find out what's the potential donors' health conditions. Are they, if they walk through this, are they going to make it through the other side of it? You know, and they check blood pressure and all these, it's this long process. You go in for a day and a half, basically, of just nonstop tests and information. You talk about drinking through the fire hose. I mean, that's what it is. They just overwhelm you with all of this. And then from there, you start meeting with surgeons and all of this, all of the different staff members that are involved in the transplants. I mean, they have you talking to counselors and to make sure mentally you're going to be okay afterwards and all this kind of thing. And so it really was an extensive filtering process.
How long did all that take?
Oh, wow. I'm trying to think of.
You started in July.
Yeah. And it wasn't until, it was almost a year.
Yeah, because we found out
through
April.
Through the whole process.
Right.
You started in July and you found out that he was a match in April.
He found out before I did. They keep you separate. The transplant side and the donor, they don't talk. So they don't want me to know what's going on. I have.
But you guys are really good friends.
That's what makes our situation different.
So let me clarify and catch up real quick. So if you haven't caught up in the conversation, Hook has the kidney failure, and Andy is one of the people researching. Right? Can I be a donor for him?
Yeah. Yep.
And so you're going through that process, which is long and extensive. Hook, you had like 10 to 15 people, didn't you, that applied? Like, I think that's really awesome.
Oh man, it's incredible.
Because like I'm thinking again, we talked about friendship a little earlier, like across the racial divide, but like, how do you have that many people in your network that are willing to give you a part of themselves?
Let me tell you something. That
had to feel good.
I really didn't appreciate it until later in the process. You know, to me, acquiring donors to me, it was like a game. I would get people, you know, I'm a funny guy. And so I'm going around and people know I'm sick and you know, how we greet, man, Hook, I love you. I said, do you really love me? How much? You love me? Are you one of those Christians that throw out, I love you?
I'll help you move. I'm not kidding you.
But if you love me, here's a link.
Yeah, business cards printed up.
So after going through this for a while, you know, several people say, well, Hook, man, my blood type is Rocky Road, man. You don't want nothing that got to go in my body. So then I began to scan. I said, listen, this is the deal. Let's just put it on the table. You can give me a kidney, or you can just give me $1,000 today. Who do I write the check to? So we just went through that.
So you made a lot of money in this process.
Hook cleared 40 grand off of this thing.
I said, man, do I really want a kidney, or do I want this money? So, but we made it a game, and again, so many people love me. That's
so cool.
They care about me.
So out of those 10 to 15, how many people were matches?
You only, like I said, I don't know anything that goes on the other side. All I know is the day that he called me, sat me down, and told me, Hook, I got some good news for you.
I got you $1,000.
So walk me, as you go to that experience in that room, walk me through what was said and how that.
Well, tell them, you know, from the time that we started in July, just to explain how we walked through it and up until that day.
Yeah. Because like Hook said, they really try to keep us in the dark as to where each other are in the process. You know, they even instructed me at different times, hey, you know, you may not want to have this conversation with Hook. And
to even let him know that you're applying, or what? Okay. But you did know he applied?
I know I gave him the link.
Okay.
I have no idea what they do with the link.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
And even there were just little moments in the process that we couldn't have even scripted. I mean, we were in the front office at the church one day, and the conversation surrounding blood type came up. And most people, you ask them their blood type, they have no idea. I have no idea. I have no clue. Right. Well, he mentions that he's O positive, and we're just laughing because here I am in the office. I happen to know mine, and I'm O positive, and that's one of those blood types.
Yeah.
It's like you just don't meet a lot of people.
Right.
What are the odds of
Well,
even that?
in the kidney area, the A's and B's can kind of match, and there's some flexibility. O positive, you got to get an O positive. I mean, if the guy that gives you has to be an O positive, so that's where you are with that. So
I'm O negative. I'm O negative. I am O negative.
Yeah.
So
you need to make some O negative friends.
yeah.
What are you?
I'm not O negative.
He doesn't know. See, that's the.
I don't know. I need to find out.
You're one of those who don't know.
I don't know. I need to find out.
Yeah.
Here.
I need to find out. Okay, so cool. So yeah, keep us going.
So in that, I mean, as much as we were maybe being instructed not to share with each other
Right.
where we are in the process because of the friendship
Yeah.
and just the love we have for each other, we would give updates of hey, here's they've plus you work together and suddenly I'm out of the office for a day and a half for what? I've got
Yeah. I'm going fishing, Hook.
Why is Andy gone?
Yeah.
So I would let him know, hey, I'm going in. Here's the testing that I have going on, and
Andy, what's that thing on your arm?
Yeah.
right. Why are they monitoring your blood?
I feel like
don't
Hook
know.
is such a
That's
practical joker that this would have been a prime opportunity to pull some jokes on Hook.
You don't know me. I'm a straight guy.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, sure. So you keep this. So then the process is going.
I just keep thinking about him being a straight shooter and how that just about derailed me right there.
Yeah.
Everything else today has been true. But yeah, we keep going in the process. So we're giving updates.
Yeah.
Hey, here's the thing. It seems like I might be a match. And they haven't said to me, you're a match, right?
Mhm.
In this process, the testing, all that, they just keep pushing you. It's almost like they push you through basic training. They push you through tech school or whatever. It's kind of like that. They just keep pushing you through to the next process. And so we would update each other. And both of us were really trying to do our best to guard our hearts in the sense of not getting our hopes, but at the same time thinking about how amazing this would be if this is the story that God was writing. If the two of us got to be a part of this journey.
One bad test could knock this whole thing off the rails.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And there were moments in the process, and it was like we've said, it was a long process, but there were moments where I just really felt like God was kind of saying, hey, this is going to happen. This is just would feel a peace about the next step. And it was more a sense of like this confidence that I don't want to say anything too early, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a match.
So you're married, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the conversation with your wife like after you find out that you are good to go? Like, I mean, this is not saying, hey, babe, I'm going to take a couple days and go with the guys. I mean, this is a big life-changing thing. How's that conversation go with your family?
And it was as much as the testing and everything was a process, so were the conversations.
Yeah.
It's a continual, here we are today at this point thinking it's a possibility. Let's talk about that. Okay. Then the next stage is we're a blood type match and there's things that are starting to line up. Let's talk about that. And then you get to these kind of big steps in the process where you realize we're not just exploring the possibilities anymore. We got to really talk about how does this impact our family?
Yeah.
What's the long-term impact on my health? Is there long-term impacts that I need to be aware of? And we really had to hash that out. And to be honest, like those are not easy conversations when you've got maybe someone like me who's I'm ready to kind of run into anything like, oh, let's do it. And my wife is so wise and so steady in so many ways that she just kind of grounds things and says, okay, let's think this through.
That's called my wife. Is that just
and my wife?
They're great at discernment. It's one of the worst spiritual gifts out there is discernment. Like, just let me go.
No, but I totally get that. Like oh, there's a building on fire. Let's run in and save the animals, and the kids. And she's like, are you sure? Yeah, chill out for a second. Let's talk this through.
If you're listening, Allison, I was just joking.
He's not.
For the camera.
One of the things about Andy's situation is they processed it. Michelle, his wife, is on staff as well. So I'm great friends with her. Our families are tight. And Andy's family is a medical family. He has several people in his family who are aware of what he's going through.
Okay.
So he had great people to inform him that he wasn't going off false information.
Oh, so you have like doctors and nurses and those kind of people in your family?
Yeah, got a lot of medical professionals that were able to just speak into the process.
They're like, do you really like Hulk that much?
You know what this means, right?
When you said you were getting dialysis, how often were you getting dialysis before this procedure?
Well, when I was in the hospital, it was 3 times a week. From January, February, it was 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. When I went to home dialysis in July, I initially did it every night for 9 hours.
Every night for 9 hours?
7 days for 9 hours. You hook up before you go to bed.
So it happens during the night?
During the night, yeah, which was what makes it so great. It's while you're asleep.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
That dialysis is so great.
Right. Let me tell you something.
And he's like, why did I do this then?
Right. When I did it in center, it was hard.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I would do it 5 a.m. I get off at 9:30, 10. And I try to go to work by 1, 2 o'clock. I'm done. There's nothing left because your blood leaves your body, goes through this filter and comes back in.
Yeah.
In home dialysis, there's a solution that goes in your body and pulls the contaminants out, and you flush it away. So it's a lot easier.
I got to say this. You guys are obviously very, very good friends. I've loved this man for 20
I know what you're gonna say.
If Zach came to me and he said, Chris, things are kind of tight. I need a couple of bucks. No problem. I'm just going to give him that money. He goes, hey, my car broke down. Here, take my car. Maybe I need some hair plugs from my head. Fine. Fine. I lost a finger. I can't type. Here, take my finger. But that's the extent. I think that's the extent.
Like, one finger.
I think the extent is a finger. I just think about you, Andy, like sitting on that table before you get knocked out, thinking, holy cow, my world is about to change for somebody I love very dearly. Yeah. And now he won't have to have the 9-hour infusions if everything goes right. But that's not a guarantee either.
No. Right. Yeah.
Like we've heard people get kidney transplants and it doesn't work. And now you're down a kidney and he's still on. Right. I mean, holy cow, that's a story.
Right. But we know, with God, once you get the go from God, then you trust him with all the results. And that's one of the things with Andy. Many people asking, how could you do that? What did you have any checks, any doubts, any fears? And Andy would always say, man, I gave it to God, and I just felt like God gave me the go to do this. And once you get to go from God, it all that other stuff, the fear, the doubts, and anxieties change because you heard it from him.
And as pastors, let's be honest, maybe the greatest sermon illustration of all time. Yeah. I mean,
is that what this whole thing was about?
Is it all about?
That was the purpose.
Okay,
I'm gonna need.
But we laugh at that. But one of the things that God did out of this, and it's a backstory, is our senior pastor was retiring in 19, right before COVID.
Oh wow!
And Andy and I were the 2 candidates for the lead pastor position at Bellevue. And Andy got the job. Andy had been on staff
2 years.
2 years. I'd been on staff 25 years.
Oh.
Andy's white. I'm black.
Sure.
I'm 60-some. Andy's
30-some.
30-some. So we had some challenges in our church.
Wow.
As far along as we thought we were racially in our church, we thought we were doing pretty good. This rocked us.
Yeah.
Because a lot of blacks, and this is again an experience that you guys might not be familiar with, but as blacks, when you leave home, your parents tell you you're going to always have to do 3 times, 4 times, 5 times what your white competition does in order to get the job. You just know that if you're equal with them, you're not going to get the job. It's just that's what we live with. So we come into this situation, experience, age, and Andy gets the job. I totally understand where my black brothers and sisters coming from. Another example, the white guy doing it. So it shook us. And
how did you work through that? That's a huge thing, man.
Well, I knew when I applied for the job, if I get the job, it's because God wants me to have it. If I don't get the job, guess what? It's because God does not want me to have it. The thing I knew is that Beverly Christensen was my home. It was my home before I applied. It will be my home after I applied if Andy wanted me to be there. So I was okay either way because I entrusted it to God. But when you're black and you're excited about, man, we're going to have a black pastor, finally, you know, a large church, most large churches have a white pastor and blacks are there. Very few large churches have a black pastor with white people attending. We know that, we see that. So I understood that generationally, you know, our older people, my generation, they're not used to being led by a 30-some-year-old. Our mentality is the 30-year-old sits down and then speaks when asked. That's just what we grew up.
Got to get some years of experience and wisdom under your belt.
And so our seniors had a hard time. It was hard.
Did you lose people?
Oh,
we did. Absolutely.
And think, this is why I love this man so much, is he took over in December, January of 20. COVID was March of 20.
Tough first year.
Months in, he's got to deal with where do we wear a mask or where we don't wear masks. Either way you choose, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So that's a cut. Then we talk about when they gave us permission to open the church. Well, he's got to make it, are we going to open the church? If you open the church, why are you doing that? Don't you care?
Oh, you could not make a right decision.
There you go. Yeah. So that's what he's dealing with. And then we go into the summer with the Floyd issue racially.
Yeah.
And as Andy said, this is where God is beginning to do something that's hard. So we do a racial justice thing in our church. We lost people. We had people say, why don't you just leave that stuff out there? Why are you bringing it here? That's not. And that, again, that just shows where we are when it comes to justice. We just don't understand.
Sure.
So Andy had to deal with that. Then we had the elections.
2020, what a year.
That was awful.
Personally, collectively.
It was terrible.
It was awful.
And so Andy's having to go through this. He and I are going through all of this.
I like that you said that you love this man because he navigated COVID, not because he gave you a kidney.
No. His kidney was a consequential result of our relationship. I know that.
Yeah.
But just his leadership for us through all of that. And then at the same time, wrestling through me being sick and ill, knowing how much he loves me and just the grace he gave me in that whole process of not being at work and just out of work and not being there and letting me know, Hook, whatever you need, whatever your wife needs, we're there for you.
So with all that backstory then, which is awesome to hear, because I didn't know that part of it, which is makes the story
so much
and the final part of the story even that much more beautiful. But so yeah, then you go through all the steps, the family's got your, all their opinions and good information. You go through with it. I want to know the day you heard that Andy was the match for you. First off, like, what are the odds of that? And then secondly, what did you think and what did you feel in that moment?
Well, as Andy said, we've been traveling through this, and every day we get more excited because we haven't heard anything that would disqualify.
So you guys weren't listening to the doctors. You were talking to each other. Okay.
Hilarious. Dr. Schmacher.
They know.
Hey, Hook, I got a day appointment tomorrow. Yes.
Okay, good. So when it's finally official, though, then what?
Hook's coming up to Andy, massaging him.
Andy, why don't you share that? Because he found out before I did.
Yeah. So when we kind of found out that I was a match, and not just an okay match, I checked every box. I was a perfect match for Hook, which honestly, I wish I could remember some of the statistics. You might be able to remember, but it's pretty impossible to find a perfect match like that in your immediate context. They can find you a match that is like that, but you just don't hear of friends, coworkers,
boss,
having
employee,
being a perfect match like that. And so my family, my wife and I, we found out that I was a match. And even in that, and they tell you as the potential donor, every step along the way, you can back out at any moment. I mean, they want you to know that you're not forced to do this. Even, I mean, we're in pre-op getting ready, IVs in it, and they say, are you sure you want to do this?
You know what?
So, I like the gown though. Can I keep the gown? But my wife and I talked, we had been praying along the way, constantly just coming back to God on it, and said, okay, our answer is yes. Now we want to sit down with Hook and the hospital. This was the point in which they said, do you want to tell him or do you want us to tell him?
Oh,
And we said, well, we would love to.
We've already been talking, so we might as well.
He knew.
You don't know, but
Yeah.
we're good. So reached out to Hook and just said, hey, can you meet with Michelle and I? Wanted to get Hook and his wife Melba. Unfortunately, she had to work and couldn't make it
because we didn't know what.
Yeah,
I just thought it was a work
meeting.
Yeah.
And I knew that if
Melba's like, I'm going to work. No big deal.
What do I need?
Yeah, come on.
And I knew if I didn't tell him soon, then he would hear from the hospital. Right. So it was like, we got to do this. So the three of us, my wife and I and Hook, sat down in his office and just shared with him, it's a go. We found out I'm a match, and we said yes, and we'd like to go through with this. And there was just a long silence in all of us, because there's just,
which is one of the most remarkable things, that Hook was silent.
Miraculous.
And he said, but your next grandchild is going to be named Andy.
But it was just a moment, where all of that journey that had begun all the way back in December when he got COVID and then all the way to that moment was like, you start to look back and you realize that God had his finger on every bit of it, that he was writing this story even before Hook got COVID and the transition was happening and what we were facing as a church. And I mean, God was just authoring this thing in such a way that was like, man, we don't have anything to fear because he's writing the story.
And the other interesting thing about your story is, so let's say, Hook, you get the senior pastor job. Then look at what you would have gone through.
Right.
It's almost like as disappointing as that had to have been. And
it really, hear me. It really wasn't.
Okay.
Because I just know God.
Yeah.
And I know my God. And I was in the military for 15 years. So I'm a military thinker, strategist. The way I do work, the way I think about relationships is based on military training. In the military, you get used to working for whoever. If Barney Fife is the boss, you work for Barney Fife.
Yes, sir.
That's right. And no matter who sits in that seat, it's the same response from the subordinate. Yeah. So I was prepared that God, if you put me in that seat, I can do that. If I'm here, I'm going to be the same guy no matter which seat I'm in.
Right.
And I know my church loves me no matter which seat I'm in. But what broke me, you talking about being disappointed, what broke me in this whole situation was the response of my church. The response, my family, my wife, she was hurt by this.
Yeah.
My kids at the church, they all left. They left the church
because of the reaction.
Yes, because they were just so disappointed. And again, what I said about just saying, here's another example. So having to work through, me and Andy, we're great. I mean, of any relationship, this was never a challenge.
That's awesome to hear.
But my
because that could have broke. It's for sure.
But it was just great, a great experience when Andy shared with me, and I cried.
Yeah,
he cried, we cried.
How's the recovery after you guys come out? Like, what's that like?
Why are you laughing, Hope?
I think.
Wait a second.
Expectation wise, like, I thought, man, I'm a young, healthy guy. Like, I'm going to go through this and bounce right back.
I'm going to have an internal organ ripped out of myself and play basketball in 3 days.
Honestly, I was like, it's not going to be long and I'll be back into the swing of things. And I came out of surgery feeling like I had just been hit by a truck.
Wow.
Like, boom. He came out of surgery.
He's singing.
Feeling like I've got new life. This is amazing. But I would say, I mean, truth be told, for both of us, recovery wise, it's been smooth and as expected as far as No complications, no hiccups.
How long ago did this take
things.
place?
August the 4th.
Yeah, that was back in August. So
Wow, not that
22.
far.
No,
yeah,
22.
not too far.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you have to go back and like get regular, both of y'all get regular checkups, make sure everything's working,
I
everything's
go
going?
every week.
You do?
I get a blood draw every Monday.
Oh, wow.
That's how they determine how my kidney is doing. How my
Okay.
system-
And everything's good?
everything's good. I have a slight virus that came along with the kidney.
Oh, way to go, Andy.
Yeah. Wow.
So you got a little Andy inside of you now. I mean, how's life
Just
different?
a little gift
just a
that
little
you know, that extra bow on the top of the kidney. But
Since you got the kidney, do you have a desire for bigger steaks and smaller grills?
now you say that, okay?
How did that spark us?
This is the feel. I said, man, Hook, now that you got Andy's kidney, I mean, the white guy's kidney, how does it feel? I said, well, I feel a little more privileged than I ever felt before. I mean, I can go into restaurants and I just feel like I belong now. That whole out of place thing is gone.
It's gone.
And then when I checked my bank statement and I did my credit score went up 100 points. I mean, it's just amazing. That's just a joke. Andy's get about tired of hearing it.
Yeah. And it's like, man, if I would have known all these jokes were rolling up. That's great. Oh,
That's
man.
an amazing story.
Yeah.
And so and one of the things I watched and as part of that story was the announcement to the church.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And
It
it
was a
was
beautiful day.
tear filled and like for as much as you guys had been through, that had to be
Well,
a super win in that moment in the aftermath.
think about what the church has been through. And now
Yeah.
they get to see Andy's giving Hook a kidney.
Yeah.
I got a long email from one of our preachers, Pastor Hooker. I see God's hand in this whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a long email just thanking me for not leaving the church
Yeah.
and they not have the opportunity to see the hand of God.
I mean, this is a healing moment
Yeah.
in so many ways.
Yes.
So many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
And then, as I said, I knew Andy since he was 5. Well, Andy and I went to Mexico together when he was 16. I went to Africa with Andy's father and his older brother in 2000. His mom was my secretary for 3 years. His 2 sisters, we did a ministry to foster kids together for 5 years. His mom just retired from being my son's administrative assistant. I mean, it just goes on
Crazy.
and
Yeah.
on. And so we just know that God has been over this thing since we were born. I mean,
Yeah.
God just ordained this for us.
So how do you think this story, outside of like your own context, which obviously it's been huge for both of your families, for your church family, I think for the greater Omaha
Oh, yeah.
area, like this made news and like
Yep.
it was such a cool thing to share around and see the comments of like, this is what it looks like to be a Christian and a disciple today.
Yeah.
So in all those, it's a win, but like for the everyday listener or disciple out there, how can a story like this impact them?
I think, one of the first things that comes to mind, and you've heard Hook say it several times in just answering questions, is just when you know God and you know the way that he works,
Mhm.
you're able to trust God in every step. I mean, we mentioned how going into this process of saying, could I be a donor, and having that confidence that God had given me let's go through with this. I never heard from God. There was no audible voice that said everything's going to turn out okay.
Yeah.
There was never a sense of like, as far as the surgery is going to be successful
Right.
and all these things, but there was a sense of, I've got this under control. God's
Right.
got this under control. And I hope that this story, to anyone who ever hears it, I hope that it just communicates that God is faithful, that he's unchanging, and that you can trust him. That when you let him write your story, come what may,
Yeah.
he's got you protected. He's going to care for you, and he's going to write something that you could never imagine on your own.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that's one of the major things is that, you can completely trust God with your story, and watch what he can do with it.
Yeah. For those who might not be Christians yet, He's a great God.
Yeah, man.
He loves us. He cares for us. He's in every aspect of our lives before salvation. He brings us to points of decision. The Bible says we didn't come after him, but he's coming after us. And if you're out there, and no matter what you're going through, no matter what your experience is, no matter what your challenge is, there's a God that loves you. There's a God that cares, and there's a God that's waiting to be a part of your experience in your life. And for those of us that are Christians, all things work together for the good.
Amen.
All things work together for the good.
When you delivered that, you should have walked closer to the camera.
We should have the music in the back. The music coming up in the background.
But it does. It works together for the good. And God gets so much glory out of our stories when we yield to his will and his purpose.
I'm reminded of that Bible verse that he is the author and the finisher of our stories.
Yeah.
And so
12,
I think that's what I so love about your story for the everyday disciple is our situation and stories may not be exactly the same, but there are high highs, low lows. In the middle of it all, I heard you guys say, we're trusting in God and it's going to work out and he will get the glory no matter if it has a cost to me or not.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the example, the story, and the lives that you two have touched in this process. And it's just super inspirational. So thank you for sharing it. And it's so amazing to see what God does through it. All right. So before we leave, we ask all of our guests if you could challenge our listeners to do one thing to be a greater disciple this week, what would that be? I'd love to hear from each of you. Yeah.
I think the thing that I would challenge is to find some way this week to surrender a little bit more. Because if you're going to let God write the story, then you got to surrender your need to be the author, right? And so that can look like I'm going to surrender a little bit more of my time to him this week, or I'm going to surrender a little bit more of my need to control, or I'm going to, find something this next week and say, God, I want to give you a little bit more of this than I usually do. I want to surrender a little bit more, and then watch what a faithful God will do with that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
In 2021, our pastor, Gary, was in a terrible car accident. He became in a wheelchair paraplegic. From that point to today, he never walked again. And godly man, a Job thing, representing God in every area of his life. And this happened to him. And the church, we all said, again, why Gary? Why Gary? Why Gary? And when people start asking you, there's no answers for that.
Right.
But God challenged me personally, Hook, you need to be asking the question, why not you? I said, why not me? And as I began to ponder that question, I began to understand God could trust Gary with that. God could trust Job. He said, he told the devil, why don't you try my servant Job? He's faithful in all ways.
Take away all of his stuff.
God said, Hook, can I trust you with anything that comes in your way? So from that day, I've been challenging myself, Hook, why not you? Is there anything in your life? Is there anything, attitude, any heart thing that would keep you from being used in a greater way, no matter how God chose it? Hook, why not you? So what I would challenge the audience, the young disciple, is ask yourself, why not me? When you see the challenges that some of your friends go through with medical issues, loss of job, and you say, man, what a terrible thing. I don't know what I would do. Stop there and say, well, if God would challenge me or decide to use me in that situation, could he? Could he use you in a greater way by surrendering to whatever he wants to do, however he wants to get glory, however he wants to make his name known through you? Why not you?
Amen. I'm going to let it go with that.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful ending. Thanks, fellas, for being here today.
Yeah, that was an incredible story. Thanks for coming down.
Awesome.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
it.
us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
What an incredible conversation. I'm challenged. I'm inspired. I'm ready to go. And I hope you are too. This was amazing. All the show notes, the highlights, if you want to find out more about the story and how it was covered even online, we'll put those in the show notes. I want to thank our sponsor, Red Letter Living, the team that I get to work with. We create resources that challenge people, disciples, to be greater. And so we would love pastors to work with you and your churches in a 40-day challenge. And Lent is the #1 time of the year to do that. And so you can find out more information about all of our 40-day challenges at redletterchallenge.com/join. If you're particularly interested in our newest one, Forgiving Challenge, which is where we talk a lot about reconciliation, which was a lot of where our focus was in this episode, you can find out more about that one at forgivingchallenge.com. All these links are in the show notes too. All right, so next week's great. When I had some friends look at the guest list for season 3, there were a few of them were like, yep, that's the one. And that's next week. We welcome to the show Dr. Brian Fikkert, who is author of the influential book, When Helping Hurts. Literally one of the most powerful, most influential books that shaped the church, and I would say discipleship, when it comes to helping. When it comes to serving, when it comes to doing it the right way in the last decade. And so we're going to have a great conversation with Dr. Fikkert about how do we truly help those in poverty? Like what's most effective? We're going to look at how the American dream is actually failing us. And did you know Ryan is 6'10" tall? So we're going to spend a few minutes talking tall people problems. And I think actually all you short people that wish you were tall, maybe you'll feel better about yourselves after all the problems you see Brian has to go through. So don't miss it. And the way you won't miss it, follow and subscribe on your streaming platform, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you back next week for the Red Letter Disciple.